A surprising number of parents experience this gentle, unspoken distance from their adult children as the years go by. The affection hasn't vanished. The love is very much alive. What often shifts is the way we communicate, the habits we fall into, and how we reach out to one another. Sometimes, without even knowing it, we end up creating emotional space that neither side intended. No one really prepares us for parenthood in our later years. We invest decades nurturing, guiding, and looking out for our children. Then suddenly, the roles change. They build their own lives, start their own families, and deal with their own day-to-day pressures. To us, they'll always be our kids. But to them, life has moved on, and their world is often nothing like the one we remember. The challenge isn't just letting go, but learning to share their journey in a new way, walking beside them as equals, with patience, dignity, and a willingness to step back when needed. Today, let's look at some of the easy-to-miss patterns that can put distance between parents and their grown children. These usually aren't intentional or mean-spirited. Often, they're just old habits or fears playing out. But the good news is, even small adjustments, changing the way we speak, rethinking our expectations, or offering support instead of advice, can help rebuild closeness, spark laughter, and restore the ease you may be longing for. Let's start with one of the quietest yet most powerful ways that we can drive our children away without ever meaning to, and that's by constantly complaining. It might not sound like a big deal, after all, you're just being honest. You've earned the right to speak freely, haven't you? You've lived a life full of experiences, pain, and perseverance. If your back aches, it aches. If the world feels like it's changing too fast, it is. If your neighbour's music is too loud or politics are a mess, well, you're just saying what you feel. But here's what we often forget. While your child may love you with all their heart, they are also carrying a weight of their own. Maybe it's a stressful job, a struggling marriage, a teenager who won't talk to them, or just the exhaustion of trying to do it all. When they call you, what they're really hoping for, even if they don't say it, is a moment of lightness, a breath of peace, a place where they can feel safe, encouraged, and maybe even a little uplifted. When every conversation starts with a sigh, a list of aches and pains, or a rundown of everything that's wrong in the world, it can slowly drain that sense of warmth. And you might start to notice something. They still call, but less often. They visit, but they don't stay as long. And when they do come around, they stop asking, "How are you?" Not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to carry the heaviness every single time. That doesn't mean you need to bottle everything up or pretend that life is perfect. Far from it. But it does mean finding a balance. If you're going to share your pain, wrap it in a little bit of gratitude. If you're going to talk about your loneliness, also talk about the joy you felt when you saw the sunrise this morning or heard from an old friend. Instead of letting the tone of the conversation spiral into everything that's wrong, try ending it with something that reminds your child that their visit lifted you, not that they sat through another storm. I once knew a man named George, 71 years old and a proud father of 3. But he had this habit. Every time someone asked, "How are you, George?" he'd let out a big sigh and say, "Still alive." It became his trademark line. At first, people chuckled, but over time they stopped asking. Not because they didn't love him, but because they didn't know how to respond anymore. One day, George decided to try something different. When someone asked how he was, he'd smile gently and say, "Could be worse. Got to see the sun this morning." And you know what happened? His phone started ringing more. His kids stayed longer. Sometimes just a small shift in attitude opens the door for connection again. Now, let's talk about another thing that quietly builds distance. The expectation that our children should always be there. Call regularly, visit often, and drop everything the moment we need them. And listen, I get it. After all you've done for them, the late nights, the sacrifices, the love, Isn't it fair to expect some of that in return? But here's the hard truth. When love turns into obligation, people start to pull away. Adult children, especially those juggling jobs, families, and their own health, already feel stretched thin. When every interaction comes with a reminder of how they're falling short, "You never call anymore. I guess you're too busy for your old mom." It doesn't inspire closeness. It inspires guilt, and guilt is a terrible foundation for a relationship. Think about it like this. Would you rather your child visit you because they truly want to, or because they feel they have to? Would you rather hear their voice because they're excited to talk, or because they're checking a box out of obligation? Let me tell you about Linda, 75 years old, widowed, and incredibly devoted to her daughter. But every time her daughter called, Linda would answer with a tired voice and say, "So, I guess you're too busy for me again." She meant it half-jokingly, but the effect was anything but funny. Her daughter started pulling back. She'd still visit, but she stopped sharing stories. She stopped laughing like she used to. The closeness faded. Then something shifted. Linda decided to try something new. When her daughter called, she greeted her warmly. "I'm so glad you called. I love hearing your voice." And just like that, the door opened again. Her daughter began calling more often. She stayed longer. They laughed together again. That's the secret no one says out loud. Love flourishes when it feels like a gift, not a duty. If we want our children to feel close, to stay connected, not just out of tradition, but out of joy, we have to make our presence feel like a place of comfort, not pressure. You don't need long speeches. Sometimes all it takes is a change in tone, one that says, "I'm happy you're here," instead of, "Why weren't you here sooner?" What's beautiful about all this is that it's never too late to adjust. Relationships aren't fixed. They breathe, they bend, they can be renewed with the right touch, a softer word, a different lens. And while you can't control how your children respond, you do have the power to create the kind of space they'll want to come back to, a space that feels warm, open, and free of guilt. Let's keep going, because now that we've opened this door, there's more to explore. There's something else that often gets in the way, even when it's coming from a place of deep love. It's the habit of stepping in again and again to guide, or rather, to control our children's decisions. Now, I know that word sounds harsh. Control doesn't feel like what we're doing. We think of it as helping, offering wisdom, protecting them from mistakes. And maybe that's exactly how it starts. But the truth is, when advice turns into instructions and concern becomes criticism, it starts to feel suffocating, not supportive. It's hard to let go of the role we've played for so long. We've spent most of our adult lives making decisions for our children, or at least helping them steer through life. So when they choose a partner we don't approve of, or raise their children differently than we did, or make career moves we wouldn't have, it can be difficult to stay quiet. Our instincts kick in. We want to fix it. We want to guide. But what we don't always see is that to them it can feel like we're judging, like we're saying, "You're not doing it right." And here's the irony. The more we push, the more they pull away. That open space where they once shared their worries and questions slowly closes. They stop asking for our thoughts, not because they don't care, but because they don't feel safe to. No one, no matter how old they are, wants to feel like a child again in the presence of their parent. I remember Walter, an 81-year-old father who meant well, but just couldn't help himself. His son was going through a rough patch financially, and every time they spoke, Walter would offer advice, strong, blunt, sometimes cutting. "You should have saved more." "Why did you take that job?" "You're making the same mistakes again." He thought he was being honest. He thought he was helping. But to his son, it felt like another punch to the gut when he was already down. And eventually, the calls stopped. Walter was heartbroken. He thought his son was ungrateful. But after some quiet reflection, he tried something different. Instead of leading with criticism, he simply asked, "How are you feeling about everything?" That small change, that open-ended, non-judgmental question, reopened the door. His son started talking again, not because he was told what to do, but because someone finally listened without trying to take over. That's the kind of space we can all learn to create, a space where our children feel heard, not handled, where they come to us, not out of obligation, but because they know they'll be met with respect and compassion. Respect in old age doesn't come from how much advice we give. It comes from how much we're willing to listen without jumping in to fix what was never ours to fix. Now let's talk about something that's even more subtle and even more damaging if we're not careful: the habit of keeping score. It might sound innocent, even justified at times. I called them last time, so it's their turn now. I watched the grandkids all weekend and they didn't even say thank you. Or, even more quietly, she only stayed 20 minutes this time. These are the little mental notes we keep, and they add up. We may not say them out loud, but they begin to colour the way we see our children. Every interaction gets weighed, measured, compared, and soon enough, nothing feels good enough anymore. This silent tally system can poison even the strongest bonds, because instead of love being a gift, it becomes a transaction. Instead of connection, we feel disappointment. And the worst part is our children can feel it. They sense the energy shift, even if we never speak a word of it. Margaret, a 76-year-old mother I once knew, kept a notebook by her phone. She would jot down how many times her daughter called, how often she visited, how long the visits lasted. At first it was just curiosity, but over time that notebook became a source of pain. Every blank page felt like abandonment. Every short visit became another line on the ledger. And slowly, her disappointment started to seep into her voice. Her daughter noticed and withdrew, not because she didn't care, but because she felt like she was always falling short. What changed wasn't just the behaviour, it was the expectation. Margaret decided to put the notebook away. Instead of saying, "Where have you been?" she began saying, "It's so nice to hear your voice." That shift, that simple act of letting go of the scoreboard, opened the door again. Her daughter started calling more, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. When we stop counting, we make room for joy again, room for love to grow freely, without guilt, without pressure, without rules. And speaking of guilt, let's take a breath and gently look at this next piece. It's one of the most painful traps many of us fall into, often without realizing it: guilt tripping. It doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. It might be as quiet as a sigh when they say goodbye, or a little comment like, "Well, I guess I'm not important anymore," or "I know you're busy. Too busy for me, I suppose." We don't say it to hurt them. We say it because we miss them, because we feel invisible sometimes, because our hearts ache for connection. But when those feelings come out through guilt, they don't draw our children closer. They push them away. Guilt is heavy, and most adult children are already carrying more of it than they'll ever say out loud. When we add more, even with the softest voice or saddest eyes, it can make them dread visiting, not because they don't love us, but because it feels like they're walking into a courtroom instead of a home. Let me share something about Evelyn, a sweet and witty 76-year-old who loved her daughter more than anything. But every time her daughter came to visit, Evelyn would sigh deeply when she left, saying, "You always have to go so soon. I wish I still mattered." Her daughter at first tried to ignore it, then she started staying less time, then eventually she stopped visiting for a while. When Evelyn realised how her words were landing, she felt devastated. She didn't want to push her daughter away. She was just trying to say, "I miss you." So she tried a different approach. The next time her daughter came by, Evelyn smiled and said, "I know how busy you are. Thank you for coming. It means more than you know." That one line changed everything. Her daughter teared up. She hugged her mum tight and she came back, not out of guilt, but out of love. There's something powerful in choosing gratitude over guilt. One invites, the other repels. One says, "I see you and I'm thankful." The other says, "You failed me again." Our words carry weight, not just in what we say, but in how we make people feel. And when our children feel appreciated, they rise. They show up more. They stay longer. They give more. Not because we pulled them in, but because they were drawn in. Let's take a breath here. These conversations aren't always easy, but they're important. And if you're still here, still listening, still open to hearing these reflections, that says so much about the love in your heart and the strength of your spirit. Sometimes the hardest lesson in later life is this: love doesn't mean closeness if it doesn't respect boundaries. And one of the most common yet invisible ways older parents unintentionally harm their bond with their children is by stepping across those boundaries even when they're doing it with love. It can look like simple questions. Why are you letting him wear that? Are you sure you should be working so late? How much did you pay for that? You might think you're just being curious, concerned, helpful, but to your adult children it might feel like scrutiny, like someone is looking over their shoulder at every decision they make, not as a partner, but as a critic. This isn't about shutting you out. Most adult children deeply value their parents' wisdom when it's offered at the right time and in the right way. What they struggle with is the constant subtle pressure to justify their lives. And when those boundaries are crossed too often, something shifts. They stop sharing. They stop picking up the phone. They build quiet walls. Not out of anger, but out of the need to protect their space, their peace, their independence. Let me tell you about George again, now in his early 80s. He adored his daughter, called her every day, but over time those calls became little interviews. Questions about her job, her husband, the kids' grades, even her bank account. She began to dread them, not because she didn't love him, but because it felt like she was back in high school, being watched and corrected. Eventually, she stopped answering every day, then just once a week, then even less. George didn't understand. He felt confused, even hurt. A friend gently pointed it out to him. "You're making her feel like she's still a teenager. She's grown now. She needs you to stand beside her, not above her." That was a wake-up call. George didn't stop calling, but he started doing it differently. Before diving into questions, he'd start with, "Do you have a minute to talk?" And instead of probing, he asked, "What's new in your world?" That little shift said everything. It said, "I trust you. I respect your space. I want to hear you, not manage you." And just like that, the walls came down. His daughter called back more, she stayed on longer, she laughed again, because what she felt was something we all need. Not supervision, but support. Not monitoring, but mutual respect. So let me say this clearly, and I hope it lands gently. Respecting your children's boundaries doesn't mean stepping out of their lives. It means showing them that you see them, really see them, as full, capable adults who are worthy of space, privacy, and trust. It means listening more than advising, asking before offering, and remembering that your presence, not your pressure, is what they truly long for. And if you've noticed any of these patterns in your own life, the complaints, the guilt trips, the scorekeeping, the unsolicited advice, please know that this isn't about blame. It's about awareness. It's about love. Because the very fact that you're here watching this, open to reflection, tells me something powerful. You care deeply and you're willing to grow. That right there is the heart of connection. Relationships, especially with our children, are not fixed in stone. They breathe, they stretch, they change. And the beauty of this stage of life is that you have the wisdom and patience to lead with something younger folks are still learning: humility, softness, The grace to say, maybe I can do this differently. And you absolutely can. Whether you've made one of these mistakes or all of them, you are not alone. We all stumble, but we also have the power to repair, to rebuild, to reconnect. Not by shouting louder, but by softening our tone. Not by demanding more, but by inviting more with warmth, presence, and genuine care. So take a moment right now and ask yourself, what kind of space do I create when my child calls or visits? Do I feel like comfort or like another obligation? Do I respond with openness or with quiet judgment? These aren't easy questions, but they're the ones that matter, because it's in the asking, not the perfection, that we begin to heal. And here's the most encouraging part of all. Small changes create big shifts. A different tone, a gentler word, a simple sentence like, "I'm just glad you're here," instead of, "It's about time." These are the things your children will carry in their hearts. Not your opinions, not your corrections, but your kindness, your presence, your love without conditions. So, if you've been wondering why the bond feels different, if the silence between visits has grown a little too loud, if your heart aches for a connection that used to feel effortless, now you know it's not too late. It never is. You have the power to change the atmosphere, to be the calm, steady presence that your child doesn't want to avoid, but run toward. Not because they owe it to you, but because being with you feels like coming home. If today's message touched you or got you thinking, I'd love to hear your perspective. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what resonated or what changes you might try in your own relationships. The Timeless Wisdom community is made up of caring, thoughtful people just like you, all supporting each other as we learn and grow together. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps others find these conversations. And if you want to see more honest, uplifting discussions about life, family, and connection, make sure you subscribe to Timeless Wisdom and tap the notification bell so you'll never miss a new video. Remember, you're never alone on this path. We're walking it side by side, offering kindness, encouragement, and the gentle reminder that it's never too late to build deeper bonds or welcome more love into our lives. Here's to living fully, appreciating every season, and finding wisdom in every year. Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to see you again in the next video on Timeless Wisdom.